Imagine believing your secrets were safe for 30 years, only to discover they never were. German officers trusted Enigma completely until 1974 shattered that confidence. One admiral's suspicious diary entry, a letter written in shock, the cryptographer's fatal miscalculation. What they said next changed history's understanding forever. The unbreakable machine. For years, Germany had a secret weapon that wasn't a gun or a bomb. It was a machine. The Enigma machine looked like a typewriter, but it did something far more powerful. It turned normal messages into scrabbled code that seemed impossible to read. German officers believed this machine was their shield. Every military order, every battle plan, every submarine location, all protected by Enigma's complex system. The machine had rotating wheels inside that changed the code billions of times. German commanders slept well at night, knowing their enemies couldn't possibly crack it. They sent thousands of messages every single day, confident that even if the enemy intercepted them, those messages would remain gibberish forever. This wasn't just confidence, it was absolute certainty. Their top mathematicians had checked the numbers. Breaking Enigma would take longer than a human lifetime. Or so they thought. But what they didn't know was happening at a secret location in England. The secret war they never knew. While German officers typed their secret messages with complete trust, something extraordinary was happening in the English countryside. At a place called Bletchley Park, thousands of brilliant minds worked day and night on one mission: break Enigma. Mathematicians, chess champions, linguists, and even crossword puzzle experts gathered in secret. They built massive machines to test millions of code combinations. Every day they intercepted German messages from the air, and every day they cracked them. The Allies knew where German submarines were hiding. They knew when attacks were coming. They could read Hitler's orders almost as fast as his own generals. But here's the incredible part. The Germans never found out. Not during the entire war, not when they lost battles they should have won, not even when the war ended in 1945. The secret stayed locked away, buried deep in classified files. For almost 30 years, not a single word leaked until one day in 1974, the day the secret broke. In 1974, a book appeared in British bookstores that would shock the world. It was called The Ultra Secret, written by a former Royal Air Force officer. For the first time ever, the public learned the truth. The Allies had been reading German codes throughout the entire war. Newspapers exploded with the story. Historians scrambled to rewrite World War II's history. But the people most stunned weren't historians or journalists. They were the aging German officers who had trusted Enigma with their lives. These men, now in their 60s and 70s, suddenly realized their perfect machine had failed them completely. Everything they believed about the war had to be reconsidered. Every lost battle, every sunk submarine, every failed attack, could it all have been because the enemy was reading their mail? The psychological impact was devastating. Imagine learning 3 decades later that your greatest secret was never secret at all. One man's reaction stood out above all others: the admiral's diary entry. Admiral Karl Donitz commanded Germany's deadly U-boat fleet during the war. His submarines hunted Allied ships across the Atlantic Ocean, but something kept bothering him during the war. Too often, his submarines sailed into positions where enemy ships were waiting. Too many times, his careful plans seemed to fall apart. In November 1941, Donitz wrote something troubling in his private war diary. He suspected the British might be reading their radio messages somehow. It seemed the only explanation, so he took his concerns to the experts, Germany's top code specialists, and the Naval War Staff. They investigated his theory carefully. They ran the mathematics. They checked the Enigma system. Their conclusion: impossible. Breaking Enigma was out of the question, they told him. The admiral had to accept their answer. He pushed his doubts aside and continued trusting the machine. But those doubts never completely disappeared. When the truth finally came out in 1974, Donitz had something to say.
The letter written in shock. Right after learning about Ultra in 1974, the elderly Admiral Donitz picked up his pen. He wrote a letter that revealed his complicated feelings. In it, he admitted what he'd suspected all along, that something was wrong during the war. He'd felt it in his gut. The patterns were too consistent, the Allied responses too perfect. But here's what frustrated him most. He'd been overruled by the experts. The cryptographers, the mathematicians, the technical specialists, they all insisted breaking Enigma was mathematically impossible. What could a naval admiral do against such certainty? He wasn't a code expert. He commanded ships and submarines, not mathematical equations. So he deferred to their expertise, even though his instincts screamed otherwise. Now, nearly 30 years later, his worst fears were confirmed. His suspicions had been right. But the confirmation brought no satisfaction, only the bitter realization that thousands of his men might have survived if someone had listened. But why were those experts so wrong? The fatal miscalculation. The German code experts weren't stupid. They were brilliant mathematicians who understood Enigma's complexity perfectly. They had calculated that breaking the code would require checking billions of possible combinations. If a team of codebreakers worked full-time, it might take several lifetimes to crack even a single message. Their math was correct. Their logic was sound. But they made one catastrophic assumption. They assumed the enemy would approach the problem the same way they would. They never imagined the sheer scale of what the Allies would attempt. The Germans didn't predict that Britain would gather thousands of the brightest minds in one location. They couldn't foresee the massive mechanical computers built specifically to test millions of combinations automatically. They underestimated human determination. The German experts looked at Enigma and saw an impossible puzzle. The British looked at the same puzzle and said, "We'll build a machine to solve it." That difference in mindset cost Germany the war. The consequences of this miscalculation were staggering. What it all meant. When the full picture emerged in 1974, historians began recalculating the war's timeline. How many battles were won because of Ultra? How many lives were saved? The estimates were shocking. The code-breaking might have shortened the war by 2 to 4 years. That meant millions of lives saved. For the German officers learning this truth, the revelation was deeply personal. Some felt betrayed by their own experts. Others experienced profound sadness thinking about the men lost unnecessarily. A few insisted they'd suspected it all along, though their wartime actions suggested otherwise. The younger generation of Germans had different reactions. Many felt relief that their fathers and grandfathers had faced an impossible situation. Losing wasn't about German failure, but Allied brilliance. The story reshaped how the world understood World War II. It proved that wars aren't just won on battlefields with guns and tanks. Sometimes the real victory happens in quiet rooms where brilliant minds solve impossible puzzles. But one question remained unanswered. The lesson that changed everything. Could it happen again? That's what military leaders worldwide asked after learning about Enigma's fall. The answer changed how countries approach secret communications forever. Today's encryption systems are tested not by assuming they're unbreakable, but by assuming the enemy will throw unlimited resources at breaking them. Modern cryptographers learn from Germany's mistake. Never underestimate what a determined opponent will attempt. The Enigma story teaches us something profound about human nature. We trust systems that look complicated. We believe experts who sound certain. We assume our secrets are safe because we want them to be safe. But the German officers who spoke out in 1974 left us with a warning. Question everything, especially when everything seems perfect. Their machine wasn't unbreakable. Their experts weren't infallible. And their confidence became their greatest vulnerability. In the end, what German officers said when they learned the truth wasn't just about codes and machines. It was about the danger of absolute certainty. Sometimes, the strongest fortress has the weakest foundation. The moment German High Command discovered their Enigma compromise remains one of history's most dramatic revelations. These first-person accounts from military leaders show how the secret revealed in 1974 shattered decades of confidence. When the code-broken story finally emerged, it wasn't just about cryptography. It was about trust, miscalculation, and the human cost of technological overconfidence. The response from aging officers ranged from shock to vindication, forever changing our understanding of the war. Their words remind us, in warfare, your greatest strength can become your deadliest weakness. Question everything. Trust nothing completely.